One winter's night, a hungry cat, walking in a wood, spotted a pigeon in a leafless tree. "Good morning, Mrs. Pigeon," said the cat. "You are clever to be able to fly." Mrs. Pigeon puffed up her feathers in pride and answered, "Yes, I am, aren't I?" "Indeed," said the cat, "but you're not as clever as me." "Well, if you're so clever, Mr. Cat, make all the stars in the sky disappear," Mrs. Pigeon sniffed. Mr. Cat sat down and, looking up at the cold night sky, replied, "That may take some time." After a while, Mrs. Pigeon became impatient. "What is taking you so long?" she asked, thinking the task she had set him was impossible. Mr. Cat stroked his whiskers with one paw and pointed towards the sky and meowed. "It is done." Mrs. Pigeon did not believe him, so she flew above the trees to see for herself. It was dawn. The sun was rising, and every star had vanished from the sky. When the pigeon returned, Mr. Cat remarked, "You are clever to be able to fly, yet you're not as clever as me." Mrs. Pigeon snorted, "If you're so clever, Mr. Cat, make all the water in the garden pond disappear." Mr. Cat curled up his tail and answered casually, "That may take some time." A whole day passed, and Mrs. Pigeon grew very impatient. It was cold, and she hopped up and down on one leg. "What is taking you so long?" she demanded, sure that the task she had set was impossible. Mr. Cat licked his paw and meowed, "It is done." Mrs. Pigeon didn't believe him, so she flew off to see for herself. Sure enough, the water had disappeared, for during the night the pond had frozen, turning it into ice. When Mrs. Pigeon returned, Mr. Cat flattered her again. "You are clever to be able to fly, but you're not as clever as me." Mrs. Pigeon was quite annoyed and squawked, "If you're so clever, let me see you make the sun disappear." With one paw, Mr. Cat rubbed behind his ear and meowed, "That may take some time." Mrs. Pigeon became extremely irritated. "What is taking you so long?" she snapped, thinking he would never be able to complete the task. Mr. Cat stood up, walked around the base of the tree, and meowed, "It is done." Mrs. Pigeon did not believe him and flew up above the trees to check for herself. The sun had vanished. It was hiding behind a big, fat cloud. When she returned, Mr. Cat taunted, "You are clever to be able to fly. Still, you're not as clever as me." Mrs. Pigeon was very, very angry. The cat hadn't done a thing. "If you're so clever, turn the earth under your feet to stone this instant," she ranted, thinking he would not be able to do it in 100 years. Mr. Cat looked up at the starry sky and once again meowed, "That may take some time." "You cannot have any more time. Do it now," the pigeon shouted. Mr. Cat licked his lips and he purred, "It is done." As the sun rose, Mrs. Pigeon looked down at the ground. it seemed to appear no different. She screeched, "I don't believe you! If it really has turned to stone, prove it!" The cat shook his head and meowed. "Oh, you are clever, Mrs. Pigeon. You know I can't prove it. You'll have to come down here and peck the ground to see if I tell the truth." Certain that the cat was lying, and determined to prove that she was the cleverest, Mrs. Pigeon flew down from her tree. As soon as she landed, the cat pounced on her, and as quick as can be, he ate her all up. When he had finished his meal, and only a few feathers remained, Mr. Cat patted his full tummy and purred in satisfaction. "You may have been able to fly, but you weren't as clever as